Thank you very much. I have been kindly invited to do this in English, not my mother tongue, but I'm from Ribera de Duero, so I really appreciate your comments on wine and so on. You know perfectly, of course, Professor Sheldom Glashow, as well as Alvaro de Rújula. John Beckman has joined this roundtable. I will give a brief introduction because you were not at the session this morning. If I find it. John read theoretical physics at Oxford University. After a postdoctoral period in Berkeley, you work also for Caltech. You continue at London University. So a lot of things. Let me arrive to 1984. Then you arrive to the Canary Islands. If I'm not wrong, as a research coordinator for Instituto de Astrofísica y Canarias. And you decided to remain here because I guess you love the Canary Islands.
I love the Canary Islands and the Canary Islander.
I love you. Okay. I would invite you to tell us how it's possible that one person can observe an eclipse, a solar eclipse, in totality for 74 minutes. That is, I guess, is something like a Guinness.
It's a Guinness record.
74 minutes?
Yeah. John will tell us
Earth?
how it's possible that.
On Earth?
No.
Not really.
In the sky.
I guess that we open the session for oral in question and so on. I would like just to make the case because, well, taking advantage of what you mentioned, Alvaro, about the importance of investing in basic science and also Professor Glashow. You mentioned, for instance, that around 1.4 euro is what costs for Spanish people to be at CERN per year. My first question to all of you, in order to open the roundtable, is that, well, Professor Sheldon has offered a lot of examples also about how important it is to invest in basic science in order to have technology development and so on. But the situation is quite dramatic, especially in Spain. Just as an example, it seems that we have not 8 cents per year in order to participate in the European Extremely Large Telescope. So that's the reference. So it's very dramatic. So my question to you would be, in this particular situation, how could be more convincing in order to convince that it is worth it to invest in basic science, usually producing effects at the long term, as mentioned by Professor Glashow?
Well, since I'm new, maybe I'll start if you agree. Well, I think the general public are generally more aware, more positive about basic science than the politicians and the businessmen. The general public are extremely interested in basic science, all kinds of basic science. And I'll mention one example that I happen to be involved with. A few years ago, I was in the city of Almería in southern Spain, where we were organizing some popular lectures on astronomy in general. And we were lucky to have Charles Townes, the Nobel Prize winner, who was one of the contributors to the laser, to talk actually not about the lasers, but about the center of the galaxy, which almost after he'd otherwise retired, he became a leading expert on the center of the Milky Way. So that's what he talked about. And then afterwards, he was invited to a concert of Andalusian music in a local club, and we went, and it was announced that Professor Townes was in the audience. And after the songs, a number of people came up and emotionally said, thank you, Professor Townes. My son had his retina soldered back into place thanks to the laser. And there were many people queuing up really movingly to talk to Townes because of the laser and because of this application. And I think most people are very willing to be very positive about science for these kinds of things, the kinds of things that Professor Glashow mentioned. So the question is how to, not how to tell the people. The people know, I think the people understand, and astrophysics is widely appreciated by lots and lots of people who are not scientists. But the question is how on earth to translate that in political terms, and that is more difficult.
If I may say, it's made a bit more difficult by incidents that have taken place. The Fukushima disaster, Fukushima Daiichi disaster in Japan, does not make it easier to shift from fossil fuels to nuclear energy, for example, and it makes people even more allergic to radioactivity and anything associated with the nucleus than ever. And and this is not uncommon, this happens in other circumstances as well, with the flagrant use of antibiotics in America for fattening cattle. That is definitely a very unwise procedure from the scientific point of view, because it increases the likelihood, not the likelihood, but the certainty of bugs developing immunity to the antibiotics that we need to defend ourselves. And there are many trends of anti-scientific trends in America and in Europe as well. For example, in Europe, genetically engineered crops are a no-no in Europe, whereas they're used relatively freely in the States. There are trends that we must defend against in some way if we're to make use of the positive feelings that can arise from the clear benefits of science.
Alvaro?
In my opinion, the main target in an attempt to make science more palatable to everybody is the schools. The children are not educated properly in science, in particular in our country and also in the United States. And there is no big effort to sustain a better education of science for children. And teachers of science are highly non-respected, and that's a very bad thing that could be changed, in my opinion. And the other tool that has an enormous influence, alas, is television. If we were more efficient in making entertaining introductions to science in television, as Carl Sagan did, for instance, in the United States, that would, little by little, have a very large influence. I have no hope.
Too late, Alvaro, too late, because nobody in America no kids watch television anymore. They're all busy on their cell phones, twittering to one another.
The iPhone.
Yeah, maybe it's too late. It's also, in the countries such as ours, practically all politicians are lawyers who didn't make it as lawyers and then chose a profession that requires no mental skills of any kind, and I have no solution to that.
Yeah. Well, Alvaro, in the case of astrophysics, the discipline that I know, we have seen a situation like we have to move from public outreach to public awareness. Several years ago, I remember John can support that, it was enough, let's say, to produce nice pictures, amazing stories and so on, but during the recent years we have been kindly invited to demonstrate the socioeconomic impact of our research. So we are working on the conceptual design of whatever telescope, but we have to demonstrate that there will be at the short term or at the medium term a return for society. Even this afternoon I'm invited to provide a talk for kids 6 years old, and the topic they put me is stars and the environment. So it's quite surprising for me. So people is worried about that, and they need something at the short term, even the politicians more. So public awareness would be something more wide than just public outreach. Knowledge by knowledge.
But fortunately, politicians are ignorant, and therefore, if we can persuade them with striking examples, just a few, it may change their attitude, because they may think that this is typical. If we present them with the best things that have happened, for example, the use of microwave technology that's been developed in, again, I have to talk about astrophysics because that's what I know about. The use of microwave technology, which has helped communications and has helped in every way to facilitate communications. Or, for example, the use of image intensifiers which were developed in the early days mainly to augment the intensity of astronomical sources, which are tremendously weak. So you amplify them and you amplify the image, and those are the heart of X-ray tubes now, the same technology in fact, of photomultiplying internally to reduce the dosage of X-ray tubes in all hospitals. And if you can pick out enough examples, you may be able to find a politician who actually takes some notice of, and says this is really practical. Not we would be persuaded by the kind of argument that Shelley used, pardon me using Shelley, that long-term research and deep understanding always produce long-term powerful results. What we have to show the politicians are a few short-term results, unfortunately. But these exist, so we can use them.
Yeah, we also have to defend against meteorites that, for example, those that caused quite a bit of damage in Russia recently, and there is a motivation to keep an eye out for threatening objects in space. And people are very alerted to that since, I mean, there have been 2 events in Russia over the past few hundred years.
Same day.
Well, any question from the floor is invited to what to tell us. Alvaro, for instance, you show on a slide in which the name of a private company, a Spanish company, Dragados, was involved. I'm worried about that because I would like to know if there are high-tech Spanish companies working for CERN, or we are just limited to these civil works.
No, there are scientific industrial developments of high technology. For instance, the muon detectors in one of the large experiments were developed at the CIEMAT in Madrid. That's one example. There are quite a few examples.
Another example comes to mind immediately. I mentioned the solar panels that are being used at the Geneva airport. They are manufactured by a company, a spin-off company in Valencia.
Mm-hmm. Actually, they were not discovered by a physicist. They were discovered, I mean, the invention is the son of a physicist. When he was 8 years old or so, saw a solar panel in the garden of the cafeteria at CERN that you can turn around to intensify the signal or not. And he said this would be much more efficient if properly coated, so that the light would come in and not come out. And then a passerby said, shoot, I happen to know how to do that. It's the same coating as the one in the inner part of the tube of the beams of the LHC, which is to improve the vacuum, but it's actually a coating which is also good for light for some reason.
Alvaro, concerning research teams, you have mentioned around 330 people from Spain out of 6,000 people. That means more or less 5%, something like that, of the Spanish people from member states. However, our contribution to the budget is slightly higher than that.
7%, yes.
7%. So I don't know if we are below the presence that we should have in CERN. So it's expected to have more participation from the Spanish research team, or do you think we are at the limit of our capacity?
No, we're definitely not at the limit of our capacity, but at the moment, new experts are not being created. So this is going to diminish out of the attrition of the jobs in science in Spain. However, 5% is not so bad. We are also at a level of about 7% in industrial return. I mean, things that are manufactured in Spain and are not always just digging holes are at about a 7% level of the things that CERN buys in the member states.
Okay, John?
The situation of the Spanish economy is dramatically bad, in particular in terms of employment. It's in principle well over 25%, 27% unemployment. Of course, a fraction of that is hidden in the submerged economy, so maybe it's not as bad as it seems, but it's very bad. And one of the ways in which a country like Spain could move forward and create jobs is in the field of renewable energies. This is very well known by many people and has many different types of scientific input, from physics to biology and chemistry. Physics for the things we've been talking about, but also biology for biogas and so on. So, and it's an employment-creating piece of technology and a set of technological solutions, and also exportable. And one of the previous governments realized this, but didn't do it properly, because there was a time when, about 5 years ago, when in terms of wind technology and solar technology, Spain was really a leading country. And these are all exportable things and also create employment. But as usual, it wasn't done properly, and the usual bad investments were over-expensive, people sucking subsidies instead of providing correct solutions. But I still believe that this is the way to go in Spain, and particularly in the Canary Islands, where it's miserable that the Canary Islands are the ideal platform in the world for renewable energies. They have the sun, the wind, the sea, everything, and yet almost nothing is done. A lot of talk and pilot projects, but nothing really has been done. Mm-hmm. And this is crying shame. I've been here nearly 30 years, and it was obvious 30 years ago that this was the thing to do, and it hasn't been done.
Well, concerning that, John, for instance, we could talk about the policy from the European Commission for the coming years. As you know, they are trying to support the specialization. They do not refer to applied science or to basic science. They invite regions from the Union to specialize on those topics in which they are relevant. So my question would be, for instance, concerning that, what fields, at the Canary Islands, for instance, you mentioned the renewable energies, also astrophysics is one of the topics, but in general, you know more or less the system in Spain. In general, what would be the topics on which our nation and our region should concentrate efforts for the coming years?
Well, I will say it in Spanish. Our specialties are botijos y alpargatas.
With some technological component?
Yes.
So dramatic is the situation?
I hope not, but I'm not an expert on the Spanish industrial achievements.
John?
Well, there are large companies such as Abengoa that are selling objects to produce energy, what is it called, wind generators, as well as photoelectric cells in California, for instance.
You agree on this European policy to concentrate the resources on specialization rather than to have, for instance, a collider everywhere or an observatory everywhere, so concentrate on specialization?
Well, nobody is suggesting a collider everywhere. The pursuit of high energy now is limited to the Large Hadron Collider, which has a long and healthy future. There may be a future collider in the down the line, but it is not something that people are talking about now. We have a 2-year shutdown of the Large Hadron Collider so that it can achieve its design parameters, and let us first go there. There are the field of basic science has many challenges that may or may not be appropriate for Spain to participate in, but at the moment, with the economic position being so dire, I think one does have to focus on short-term things and some way focus, for example, on these islands on issues of alternative energy. It's not unwise. There are challenges. Algae, for example, there are cellulosic techniques for extracting the fuels from cellulose. There are many other applied challenges that might be very appropriate to hit at this time in the Canaries.
John?
And as far as pure science is concerned, it's a very good training ground in all sorts of ways. So I think, first of all, I think that the European policy is probably reasonable in focusing on certain things in certain areas. You try to put money into something which goes well. That's at least one of the things that the European community ought to do. And for example, in these islands, we know astrophysics is a powerful and active field. But there are other fields which I don't want to say shouldn't be supported. They certainly should. But as far as pure science is concerned, it's a really good training ground for people to go out into the world, the real world, the outside world, and do different things. The problem in Spain is that there isn't an outside world to go into. There isn't enough industry which absorbs scientists. So it's a big problem. In other countries, you can train a physicist who can then become something in industry or something in commerce, but applying critical techniques, statistics, logical thinking to many problems. But in Spain, those opportunities are very small, so I'm not quite sure what the answer is.
John, probably, as you mentioned earlier, in that curiosity-driven research, these large-scale facilities could be a natural platform in order to provide that curiosity-driven research. And do you think these facilities are not underestimated for the potential of this type of training?
Yes, I think
I include the observatories even, not just the LHC.
Oh, yes, I'm sure. I think that the way people are thinking now is almost illiterate in terms of the connection between pure science and applied science. It's the people who make decisions just don't know, my opinion. But they should know.
Okay.
Sheldom? There's a big danger because Spain 30 years ago was not a visible presence in basic physics at all. And with a great deal of effort, it has become a serious player. And to abandon that and to run off trying to develop money-making technologies and new jobs exclusively would be crazy. So having worked so hard to get where you are, that those few extra cents per month that are necessary to keep up your commitments to astrophysics and to particle physics must not be abandoned.
Oh, but don't worry, we're helping the German economy.
Alvaro?
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay. Well, of course, if there is any question, you are invited to. I think a question there.
question is related, because we are very much in education, is related to this important reflection you made about the poor knowledge and communication in the scientific development of our children. What do you think could be a new strategy, new tools, new manners to approach, this awakeness of the scientific knowledge in our children? Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't quite hear that.
Alvaro?
I think the first thing that is lacking is respect for school teachers as people who have a very important task. They are paid very little. They are appreciated by society very, very little. And they lose interest in what they are doing because it's so tough. And the change of spirit on the importance of the school teachers and improvement of the training of school teachers in basic science would be a very good thing, which is attempted now occasionally, but on a sporadic way. It is not done systematically. There are, every weekend at CERN, you see about 10 buses with students and teachers of high school from Italy. There are very few Spaniards who ever go there, and very few Spanish teachers who are interested in learning more, and that's because they have such a tough life, among other things.
Sheldon?
Yeah, well, there's a Russian expatriate who lives in Boston, who has devoted himself to bringing Nobel laureates to high schools to talk. And Dr. Shapiro, he was once a physicist, he's retired. And I have gone now 6 or 7 times to different high schools in the area in this program. I'm just one of a dozen laureates who have done things like this. And it's really very rewarding. The high school sets aside some time. It sees to it that the students read up on the material that the visiting laureate will talk about. And I think it really makes an impact on a small number of kids. Every time I do this, I'm very impressed. We have a room with maybe 50 kids. It could be they're high school students, typically, although they could be pre-high school. And some of them will ask the usual stupid questions. I mean, how did you hear you won the Nobel Prize? What did you do with the money? Did they inscribe your name on it before or afterward? I mean, and then there are real questions about the underlying science, which are often surprisingly sophisticated, because these students have talked with their teachers beforehand and have gotten into things. And there's a feeling that something useful is being done. Of course, this is highly limited, and my high school, for example, that is to say the high school in my town of Brookline, there are so many laureates living in Brookline that they never, ever have a Nobel laureate come to talk, whereas my kids who live in a suburb 10 miles out or so were delighted to have me come to the middle school and chat with the kids, where my grandson kept his mouth very closed during that thing. And it was funny because I advocated a different system of teaching wherein you teach first physics, then chemistry, then biology, because you can't understand biology unless you understand chemistry, and there's no hope of understanding chemistry until you learn physics. Now, the American system is typically first biology, then chemistry, then physics, which makes no sense at all. So I gave that spiel to the middle school, and there was stunned silence, because that was their contention, that school. They wanted to switch to the good way of doing it. The commissioner of schools of the city was present, and they were afraid that it would appear as a set-up job where I was brought in to argue for what they wanted. It was a very, very strange experience.
John?
Well, I have to exhibit what in Spanish we call envidia sana, of living in a town so full of Nobel Prize winners. So unfortunately we can't have that as the answer to the stimulation of our children here, although it's a pleasure to welcome at least one. But
I didn't talk at high school.
no, but anyway, here it's still a pleasure. But programs where active scientists who don't have to be even Nobel Prize winners, they can be just ordinary, common, normal human scientists, can go and talk to schools and people who can go and talk about what they do. And it wouldn't take a lot of organizing for some body to do that. Most people I know go and talk to schools without charging money. Most people I know will do that. Most scientists I know will do that. And it's only a matter of getting them organized to do it. So that's one suggestion. The other suggestion, and that could be done through the university, or it could be done, in our case, through the Instituto de Astrofísica, which has programs of that kind. But at a more basic level, I think the importance in education of not simply learning things, but understanding them, is still una asignatura pendiente, still a missing part of Spanish education. It's still, the emphasis is on learning knowledge rather than on links and understanding. And I think that that's very important for the teachers to get in mind.
José Miguel?
I would like to bring in just an advertisement, because the Spanish Confederation of Scientific Societies is running a program called Enciende, which I'm in charge of, by the way. And what we are doing is actually, we are organizing visits to primary school, because we think that in primary school, children need to begin understanding science. So we are running visits to primary schools, and we are also producing very simple material, scientific material for teachers, for elementary teachers. The idea is that we are not promoting science at all in the sense that we do not want to form more scientifics or scientists. Essentially what we would like is to achieve that all children have some contact with science. So then when they grow up, they will have a different approach to science. Because what happened now is that there are many people who do not see anything of science throughout their life. And so when they are in politics or they are in business, whatever, they do not understand anything about science. And it's very difficult for them to even realize that science can be useful. So that's something we want to address from the very beginning of the educational years.
Okay, I guess, José Miguel, that probably the efforts shouldn't come just from the researchers, but also at the institutional level. And perhaps our institution should have a department on external funding as big enough as the department on public outreach. So giving the same importance to both things, the income and the outcome of our activity. Alvaro? Something? No. I don't know if there are more questions. There are questions over there.
Hi. All the PhD students at this university, we are organizing a divulgative activity of the city at November. And I was wondering if you could give us some pieces of advice in order to make the science more attractive for the society in this activity.
Alvaro, Sheldom?
My advice is to have experiments to make, things to do that are practical, like levitating frogs.
When I used to have a very light affiliation with the University of Houston in Texas, I would visit for 2 weeks every year. And one of the things that my colleagues at the University of Houston had organized was kind of a physics magic show. And they would, with a lot of interesting equipment, simple equipment, go off to different schools. We're talking about middle schools, and go through a bunch of demonstrations, some with fire and light, and others very simple. Just a demonstration with a soccer ball and a tennis ball, and you let them fall, and when they fall together, the tennis ball goes way up, hits the ceiling, and very surprisingly, you have a simple demonstration with a steel rod an aluminum rod about this long, and you hold it in the middle and hit it with a hammer, and it rings like a bell, because it's a very high Q system which rings for about 5 minutes audibly. And who would ever think that aluminum can ring, because one is normally familiar with aluminum pots, which do not make good bells at all. But aluminum rods make fantastic. And then you can measure, if there's a piano in the room, which there usually is, you can find out what note it is, and you can calculate the speed of sound in aluminum in a way in which these 12-year-old kids can actually understand. And all kinds of demonstrations of that kind make up a kind of magic show that gets the kids interested in science. It's kind of a Mythbusters type of approach.
Jordan?
And there's simple things you can buy which have a physical explanation, which is not very obvious. These springs that walk downstairs, you put, or the
penguin.
The penguin that dips, or the thermometers whose temperature is measured by these floating little balls with different liquids. And there are lots of things which are commercially available, which you can get to show. And the other thing is that, a telescope on a roof, or preferably outside the center of an illuminated area, just to show some simple things. The moon or satellites of Jupiter are the obvious things to show.
Yeah, to support the idea about how important experiments are when you are providing these talks. 1 year ago, I offered a talk for primary school. My daughter came back to home. I asked her, and she told me, yes, you were impressive. Your green pointing laser was impressive, was amazing. So all my talk, all my slides, but just the green powerful pointing laser. Of course, it makes a lot of fun to do to the kids. It's very frustrating, but of course you have to improve when you receive this feedback. Even I will talk. I would like to know your opinion. For instance, when we talk about topics like electroweak interactions and the Higgs boson, or the particle, Brownlee, the particle of God, or dark matter, dark energy, we have perfect ingredients for the next Star Wars movie. I don't know, for instance, if science fiction movies are trying to use, let's say, scientific vocabulary, or on the contrary, scientists are trying to use very difficult to understand vocabulary, dark matter, dark energy. Who is winning more in this symbiosis?
Well, that's a difficult question, and yes, it's right. Too many scientists are talking about teleportation or faster than light things. They confuse my students very much. But I have to mention here a course that my friend gives at university, at Andy Cohn. He's a colleague of mine in the physics department of Boston University. And his course is called Cinema Fisica. And what he does is he has the kids watch movies, and often science fiction movies, and then analyze the action from scientifically. One of my favorites is Speed 2 or Speed 3. It's some silly movie where a cruise boat crashes on land, and many people are thrown off the thing by the violent acceleration. Now they get the kids to measure the acceleration, because there are two ways of measuring the acceleration. They can actually step through the film and see how fast the speed of the ship is decreasing as it crashes on land. And also this stupid boat has a speedometer, and so you can measure how quickly you get the same result in both cases. And the acceleration is about the acceleration of a bus slowing down. And nonetheless, people are being thrown off the thing violently, and it's a clear indication that the people who made the movies are violating the laws of physics. And there are many demonstrations that can be done. There's a film every week that is whose physics is analyzed. They show a spaceship, and you're supposed to figure out how big the spaceship is. It has a bunch of windows. Well, you all know windows are going to be this size or so. If not this size, they're this size. So by counting up the number of windows and multiplying by the average size of a window, you can tell how long the spaceship is. And those are things that the students are supposed to do. The students get problems like, how much does it cost your parents when you take a hot bath? And they've learned things about electricity and how much electricity is cost. Doesn't stop some of the kids from saying $1,000. Teacher says, "Kid, you mean you really think your parents spend $1,000 for electricity every time you take a hot bath where the water is heated by electricity?" And the student will say, no, of course not. That's just a problem. There's an attitude issue here, which is very severe. Anyway, it's a great course, and he now intends to apply it to Mythbusters, which is a very popular television show produced on the Discovery Channel. My daughter works for Discovery Network, so you're encouraged to watch that show.
Well, there is a book written by Lawrence Krauss, which is called The Physics of Star Trek. And in fact, it's an interesting exercise to take any, not science fiction, almost any film. Well, one of the interesting things is Tom and Jerry, for example, and see how many violations of physical principles you can find and exactly what they are, what's really wrong with that, and science fiction, indeed, and so on. So these are interesting things to try to say, why couldn't that happen? What's wrong with it? And I think that's an interesting exercise for kids.
Okay, you see always the same window on the same plant when Tom and Jerry.
Well, the first Superman comics obeyed Newton's laws, because when Superman would leap up into the sky, the sidewalk would break. But they decided that was not conducive to the show, so they gave up on Newton's third law.
Alvaro, a big challenge. When would you expect to confirm dark matter at the collider?
I don't expect the collider to confirm dark matter, but most of my colleagues expect this to happen in the next 10 years or so.
10 years.
Well, the machine will work for another 10 years or so, and it will either find it or not find it.
Okay, John.
There's a big black secret about dark matter, which physicists don't like to talk about, and it could perfectly be that dark matter exists, it probably does exist, that it has gravitational interactions. That's how we know it exists, and has no other interactions at all, and therefore cannot be made at the accelerator, and cannot be discovered in dark mines, and cannot have indirect signals in space through its annihilation or decay. It could be completely unobservable, except by astrophysical means.
John?
That's getting dangerously near to something that you have to take on faith. So let's hope that it isn't like that. But of course, we're in the hands of nature. We cannot say what we would like. As an observationalist rather than a theorist, I would feel a lot more comfortable if we could find some other way to observe it. But if we can't, we can't.
But you found it. Don't be modest. These guys have found dark matter. They have proved that dark matter exists.
Well, yes, but there are sufficient people in my field who still challenge that, basically for the reason that there are no other means of, that it's a closed loop, that all the proof is astrophysical and that there's no other way to find it, and that if it's a particle, you ought to be able to, that it's the particle physicist's responsibility to find it.
It's only the astronomers that tell me that Mars exists. I have no direct evidence. I can see something in the sky, but that doesn't prove it.
But we can detect a few of the photons that get bounced off it. I think I'd be worried if we couldn't, but we can. And we can even offer you a photon detector, which is your eye, and you can look at the telescope, and then you will also be convinced.
Oh, that's just something created by the telescope.
Yeah. John, Sheldon, it seems like we have spent 2 centuries in order to study just 5%, 10% of the universe. And now we have to convince people to invest again to discover the 90% that is still unknown. So it's like conquisting, having all our military forces at a new territory. So probably it will not be very easy to convince people about to invest again on investment for dark matter, dark energy.
Well,
and so on.
it's very expensive. That's really one of the problems. It's true that CERN has been a marvelous center of research and has been tremendously productive in every way, socially, politically, certainly economically, and obviously scientifically. But it's getting very big now, the cost of taking further steps. So that may turn out to be a limit. I don't know. I don't know what people think.
Okay. Any more questions? Well, I think we just arrived to the end of the roundtable. It has been my real pleasure. I think that I have never been so well accompanied, apart from my wife. But I really appreciate to be here to share with you this roundtable. A final round, there is a closing session now. Thank you, John Beckman, professor at the ISC. Thank you for joining us at this roundtable.
My pleasure.
Professor Sheldon Glashow, it has been a real pleasure to have you here also.
It's been a pleasure for me.
And Professor Alvaro de Rújula, it has been a real pleasure also to have you at this roundtable. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you to all of you.